Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. I've got my popcorn junkie. What do you think of my popcorn junkie glasses?
Like them.
Yeah, they're supposed to make me look erudite and academic.
They're better, they do the job.
They do the job. Okay, so this is a review of a movie called Nitram. Nitram, which is backwards Martin. Because by all accounts this film is loosely, and I stress loosely, though I think they might be saying loosely based for legal reasons, loosely based on the story of Martin Bryant, who very well infamously shot, I think something like 36 people at Port Arthur.
38 was nearly killed, but then he'd injured like 20.
That's right, injured a lot more. So it was a mass shooting essentially in 1996 in Tasmania in Australia. And the rumour mill has it that one of the parents of one of the victims wrote an article some years later, and in it he refused to name the shooter. And there was a sense around the time that everyone would vow not to say his name in the Strangler. So there's a statement in the fact that it's called Nitram. Yeah. It stars Caleb Landry Jones. What would people know him from, Maddie? Yeah.
You might know him from Get Out as the crazy brother.
Oh, he's such a crazy brother.
Yeah.
Really.
He had a little part in Florida Project.
That's
I also
right.
think he's in the X-Men films.
Is he?
Yeah, some of the recent ones. And what's the other one that's in?
Three billboards.
Outside of him.
He's the one who sold the space on the billboards.
Yeah, he's always had like fairly small parts, but he's
Yeah.
always been like the memorable side character.
For me, he's always a bit like, I don't know, you probably, because you weren't around at the time, but the actor who played Michael J. Fox's father in Back to the Future, Crispin Glover, was always known as a very odd actor. And that was like his mainstream kind of role.
Yeah, this guy's definitely.
And this guy's a bit like that, he's offbeat. He's
The best kind of odd.
Best kind of odd. He's kind of pretty and weird.
I find him really pretty.
Yeah, he's got amazing eyes. It also stars Essie Davis, who we love, who was also in
Babadook, Ned Kelly Gang.
Yeah, exactly, Ned Kelly Gang. Interesting you should mention then Ned Kelly Gang, because this is directed by the same guy. So there you go, there's the admin. That's all the and Judy Davis, who's another great Australian actress who played his mum. In a weird way, this is like an origin story, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's an origin story, you know, it's a really close-up, not an awful lot of, I mean, there is dialogue, but it's not overly written, it's not overly
No soundtrack, remember?
You made an interesting observation, no music other than the music that happens within the film.
Played, yeah.
And so you were kind of introduced to this character. What did you think of him as we were being sort of introduced to him, and this curious guy who's clearly got all sorts of dysfunctionality and issues?
Well, I feel like this is the first film in a while that I've gone to see and not like watched the trailer for or already know much other than what you told me about it, which was you know, that it was based on a true story. That was all I knew about it, and obviously I knew that I loved the like actors in it, but I didn't know what to expect. So I hadn't seen the trailer. I didn't know what he was like, how I was going to feel. So I kind of went in blind. Which is
kind of rare in this day and age, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Not often
That's what
film.
I mean. Like, everything recently that I've seen, I've watched like 5 million trailers.
Or bloody spoilers happened. For
yeah,
stuff
exactly.
Like that.
But I went in trusting it because I was really excited about seeing him in a main role, because he's always been like a small character that I've wanted more of in film. I was really excited to just get like a whole film of him.
Just him.
I mean, the very start was the real Martin as a kid, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
He's been playing with fireworks.
Archive clip at the front.
And it was really interesting seeing that, because looking back on the film, like obviously I haven't seen any like real footage of Martin when he was grown up or whatever, but just from seeing the real clip of him as a child, you could see how well
Caleb Landry Jones
played him. It was like, I don't know, there was like a look in the eye that was he'd done so well. It was kind of like an intense but empty look. So straight away I knew that he was like, it was going to be like a great performance.
And that's right,
basically.
Yeah, and that first clip was, he was basically, as a child, this character was playing with fireworks, bangers, firecrackers, that's it, and burned himself and burned others. And so the beginning of this film, we're introduced in a weird way to his dysfunctionality and his mental health issues, because even in the interview, it's suggested to the boy that he shouldn't play with them again.
Yeah, it was like, have you learnt your lesson then? You're not going to play with firecrackers again? He's like, no, I am.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Why? Have you learnt your lesson? He goes, well, they're fun. So you kind of see that he's some
not there, and he's there. And I think that's the problem with this, and what we start to see across the film, and I think this is where the film's really clever, is we as a viewer are trying to apply all of our social norms and morals to situations. So like you're thinking, when he's playing with these firecrackers, there's a scene where he's playing with these firecrackers and he's encouraging the kids out of a school to play with him. And then he's picking up the firecrackers and
putting them in the hat.
Yeah, under no circumstances was this a sensible thing to do. And then his father pulls up and tries to kind of, sort the situation.
And yeah, like I felt like very on edge every time he was on screen, so he was very unpredictable, and I didn't know when he was gonna, like what he was gonna do or how he was gonna be.
If he was gonna blow.
But it was still so interesting because even though there was this like, he was scary, there was this innocence to him as well when he was doing these things. Like, for example, obviously putting lit firecrackers in children's hands is not like a wise thing to do, sensible or anything. And terrifying, but he genuinely seemed like he was innocently playing with his friends, and that was, do you know what I mean? Like, I felt really sad.
And also to the point that he looked off and said to his dad was trying to get him to kind of behave himself. He looked off and said, "But they're my friends." And he was and he was striving for connection, and he was, and we've got this wonderful narrative of his parents are aware of his kind of obviously his behavioural tics and his issues. Wonderful
they
scene.
approach with it very differently.
They both deal with it very differently, don't they? Yeah.
So the, like the dad was a softie.
Dad was a softie.
Yeah,
but also perhaps, did you feel the dad had the same issues?
Yeah.
He had similar issues.
Similar
yeah,
issues
I wondered whether, because a bit later in the film when he's struggling with depression, I wondered whether he was as erratic, but maybe not as erratic. That there was some dysfunction in the father that had kind of passed down. So there was, if there's a bond between this strange character Nitram and anyone else, it's with his father. Because what did you make of his mother, Judy Davis?
She was incredible. Like, her performance was insane
wasn't it?
The mum made me really sad though, because she was very, like both parents dealt with him very differently. The dad, I think, after having seen the whole film, instead of being soft, was scared of him, and therefore was softer with him and would kind of let him get away with stuff and be like, "Don't tell your mum." And the mum was definitely the harsher, like the tough love type thing. But it was heartbreaking because you could see that she did love him, but she just didn't trust him, and she was scared of him and all of this stuff. So, and I just thought that the actress managed to
Judy Davis was
like show that sometimes more with just the look on her face than even the writing.
Yeah,
so,
I agree, and I think it's a film. It is a film of great what they call longueurs, where you've got lots of shots of people just looking and interpreting and inhabiting and kind of feeling. And there's a lot of kind of feelings in this film. There's a lot of kind of I jumped out of my skin as I nearly dropped my favourite new analytical glasses. And then of course this character, he's a lost cause. He hustles for work. He wanders around the neighbourhood with a broken lawnmower. He knocks on doors. And you're right, all the way through it, there's that sense that something's going to blow.
Yeah, that even, I don't know if you remember this part, there's that really small detail before we'd kind of seen any like big blow up, like we'd only kind of seen that he was a bit odd and that he seemed kind of sweet or whatever.
Yeah.
But the first moment where I was like, ooh, I feel a bit like tense, was the first time he went out with the lawnmower. Because basically you go around with this lawnmower like knocking on people's doors to see if they wanted their lawn mowed. And he goes to this woman who's very nice to him and everything. She's like, no, I don't need it done. You can go to somebody else's house, thank you very much. And when she goes to close the door, she's just like, could you please remove your foot from the door? So like, he got his foot in there to the door open, but it never showed us his foot. I don't know, it was
that's
just like
clever. That's
a really
clever
small
detail.
little thing that I was like, oh, he doesn't quite get that that's not
right.
That's not what you do.
And so one of the people that he takes the lawnmower to and is a woman who has 1,000,001 dogs and lives in this really beautifully old, antiquated, wasted kind of house. Essie. This is Essie Davis, is the actress as well, and she.
What was the name of the character?
I can't remember the name of the character, but she was a
Helen.
Helen. That's I remember. And she was obviously an opera singer. She had money, actress. I think she owned a theatre or something. I couldn't quite work out, but she had money, and she was. I mean,
so odd as well.
Essie Davis is one of the oddest. Oh, that's right. She's also the mum from Baby Teeth. She's one of the oddest. Brilliant, batshit crazy actresses.
Yeah, she's such an amazing actress.
So as soon as you felt you couldn't have anyone as mad or as weird as him, he meets weirder.
Yeah, they were both very weird, but in different ways. Odd. But I found all of like their whole kind of relationship really. It was quite sweet. Obviously, it's hard to like say sweet and stuff because obviously what he did was awful. He's a mass murderer. Like, I'm not justifying anything he's done. But I thought just the way that it was portrayed, like their relationship was it was just like so watchable on the screen, and it was the way that she was so accepting of him, but like even then she still every now and then, like she had her boundaries with him at times, or Yeah, I don't know. Like,
And I
they
like
so
the way-
quickly bonded, and it was just really...
Yeah, and I like the way they didn't go the obvious route of, is it a sexual relationship or was it a maternal relationship? And then there was an incredibly powerful scene where Judy Davis was just phenomenal, his mum, where they met.
Cafe.
They met in the cafe, and she's, you know, if you imagine, you know, this much older woman has essentially taken your son, because not only does she sort of employ him to mow the lawn and walk the dogs, but she buys him a car.
And there was that shot of him trying to walk all the dogs.
Yeah.
And he's just got
He's got thousands of dogs. And do you remember that? Now, I'd forgotten about the scene where she goes to buy a car. Yeah.
I was saying there wasn't a single bad actor in this film. Even the car dealer was really good.
He was brilliant.
Because basically he kept doing this. He would keep doing this thing when he was in a car.
Yeah.
Martin, like when he was in a car with someone, and he would just like reach across and just pull the wheel. You know,
was
which
so
was
weird.
really unsettling.
It was like a form of Tourette's, wasn't it?
It was
like
really weird. He was laughing the whole time. I found it really funny.
Yeah.
It was really unsettling to watch because you just like, I don't know how to feel. Is this going to be okay or is it going to be really awful? But there was a really good scene because when Helen's like trying out one of the cars and Martin's in the seat and then the car dealer's behind them, and then he does the thing and like the freaking guy at the back just flips out,
loses his
and then
shit.
there was that scene where Helen's not there and she was like signing for the car and stuff, and then the car dealer just comes over to him and like grabs his head and puts it in the wheel and it's like, like it was just such a good.
And you just felt like, I mean, and the weird thing is because you know you're watching this film.
Don't you ever do that again?
Yeah, but you're sort of thinking, which one of these people is he going to get his payback on? You know, which of these characters is he gonna, you know, shoot them or enact revenge?
It's amazing in that scene the way he's like crying when she comes over. And he's like, "Are you alright?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like, he just pretended like that.
And then again, going back to this thing that I'm really intrigued by your idea that, you know, it's what's not in the film is what's in the film in a sense, right down to the inclusion or not of music. Was the fact that, in a sense, one of the creepiest scenes that gives you the biggest insight into his sociopath. He's a sociopath for sure. He doesn't see the normal cues of emotional cues of that should be sad or I should feel this. Was when the mum, Judy Davis, explained how she thought he'd got lost. He hid in the bottom of the car, and she'll never forget looking at him, and she thought he was crying, but he was laughing.
He was laughing at her pain.
Laughing at her pain.
Because she panicked because they'd play a game where he would hide and she'd find him, and then she couldn't find him one time. So she was panicking for like 2 hours. And when she got into the car and he was at the back of the car and just laughing at her crying.
And I thought that was so powerful because that was a story told, not a story shown in flashback. And I thought that's where this film was very good.
With no flashbacks.
No flashbacks. It was fully parked in the ordinariness. And I think that's
linear.
It's linear. And it was ordinary. What he was doing was ordinary. We were following this ordinary boy. And then we won't spoil what happens, but something incredibly dramatic happens. I wasn't expecting it at all with him and Essie Davis, the character, the woman who's sort of taken him in, which kind of obviously flips the film into a completely different direction. And so he finds himself sort of increasingly alone, increasingly a loner. And at one point, I leant over to you and I said, I can't remember what was the scene where we both went, this is as good a performance as Joaquin Phoenix in The Joker.
Yeah, I can't remember what moment it actually was that we were like, oh my god, this. I mean,
I know when it was. It was when he was booking a ticket to go to New York and LA. Do you remember with that lady and he just sat at the table? So he finds himself on his own. He finds himself with a lot of money, and then there are some scenes where Caleb Landry Jones just sits with, and there is this.
And you just look at the person.
Well, I can't work out if there was a boiling furnace of fury or nothing.
Yeah, me neither.
Both.
Both. That's what I meant, that like intense emptiness that he had.
Intense emptiness. That's exactly it.
But that's how he described himself as well. I mean, there was like one of the scenes that made me really sad was when he sat with his mum, which was a lot later in the film. Skipping ahead a bit, but where he's kind of trying to explain to her how it is that he feels, and he's saying like, I just don't know what I am, like I'll look at myself and I just don't, like when I look at videos of myself I don't recognise me as I am. And it was a really emotional scene, and then she just kind of, you can see that the mum really wants to like help understand, and she just goes, I don't understand what you're saying, I don't get it. And then he was like, it's fine, neither do I. And like that whole scene just really.
But would you argue, I mean, part of me was wondering, obviously the film doesn't seek to explain, justify or sanction what ultimately happens.
People had, like, now he dies not in the review, but when we spoke to her after, she said she absolutely just straight up hated him. Like she didn't feel any other emotion towards him.
Whereas, that was strange.
Yeah, whereas it was clear he was clearly very mentally unwell, and it was I feel like it's important with stuff like, even, you know, what happened is awful, and in no way does the film doesn't justify glamorize him in any way at all.
No, it doesn't.
But I think it's good with these things to see the other sides of people, and there was, underneath the scariness and unpredictability of him, like there was a slight innocence, or maybe just emptiness or not understanding, that did it brought a sweetness to him at times, and you did feel sorry for him at times, like with that whole storyline with the surfer dude. Like he wanted to be able to surf,
yes, that was lovely.
so he wanted to kind of gain this friendship with this surfer dude who was an absolute cock.
He really was, wasn't he?
Which made you feel really sorry for Martin again.
Yeah, especially that scene where he was in the bar and
really
he said smoke a spliff and, you know, she's hot, get that girl and all that, and you sort of think, oh God, this isn't...
And it's interesting that stuff like that he didn't do.
Yes.
Like, because he was kind of getting egged on to like harass this young girl, and he didn't do it.
Yes, he was very much his own boss, wasn't he?
There were a lot of things that I thought he would have done, considering he ended up being a mass murderer.
Well, the other one was you were worried for the dogs.
I thought he was going to kill the dogs. I was worried.
I thought symptom number one of a psychopath, which is killing animals.
Yeah, not even purposely. I thought, oh God, he's accidentally going to shoot one, or he's going to break his neck when he hugs it too hard. But that didn't happen. Yeah, and like we said as well, it was such an unvain performance from him as well. Like he fully just completely a bit terrifyingly inhabited the role.
But for me, what I found, it's kind of, I've thought about it so much afterwards, and I just think it's one of those really, for the squeamish, this is a weird thing to say, violence is inferred and you get some, but you don't get a lot.
It's not much.
It's not explicit, it's not gratuitous, bizarrely. It clips off almost the action at the very point that the action's going to get going.
It always happens off screen.
It all happens off screen, and so in that
there is
sense,
there is some stuff you see that's quite
shocking and arresting.
But it's not at all at a scale. Like it's only a 15. I thought that the film was going to be 18, but it didn't show much.
It made me think about the idea that I often worry about the idea that when you hear about these crazed activities, we've just had one in Chicago. All these shootings. There was a terrible one in Texas, and there was one in Denmark yesterday, 2 days ago. Sometimes we need, as a society, to characterise these people as monsters, and of course, what they've done is monstrous, and they are monsters, if you like, in doing that. But I think the challenge for us as humans is to actually recognise how ordinary those origins can be, and that it is about access to guns, and it is about the facility. I mean, and I thought
that was a big part of
that was such a powerful scene. That scene. What did you think of the scene where he goes to the gun shop?
There was this big long scene of him going to the gun shop, and I thought it was really. It was such a clever scene.
Well, because it was documentarist almost. Yeah. The guy who worked in the shop was clearly a real gun.
Yeah, and it was just so like matter of fact. Like it was scary because obviously being hit like for an American or whatever. If you're living in a country where that stuff's normal, like you wouldn't think twice about it. But for me, to see that you could just walk into a gun shop, buy a gun, and there was that moment of him asking like, "Do you have a gun license?" And then he goes, "No." He gives him the gun.
Still gives him the gun.
And it's just that, like, oh my God, like that's.
But that was such a well-directed scene, because what they did in that scene was he went through. It was almost analytical in the way it went through each gun, unpacked it, showed it, talked about it. He looked at it. He was so good in that scene, Caleb, because Caleb Landry Jones was like, "I'm getting the guns. I'm getting." And you're thinking.
But it was also, when he was like with the first gun to try out, and he pointed it at a guy's head.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And then the guy at the gun shop was like, "No." He's like, "Just joking."
But that was incredibly powerful and shocking scene. Another really shocking scene in the film is where his father, who's had his eyes on buying this farmstead or homestead, and unfortunately doesn't manage to buy it, gets gazumped. Someone else puts in a bigger offer. There was a scene where his father enters a deep depression and he's on the sofa, and he beats the living daylights out of him.
No, but what was so weird about it is,
such a scene.
Like the dad was the only one that we kind of saw. Well, and Helen, to be fair, but. We only saw like the most amount of like
love or
sadness about someone when it came to his dad. And then he goes round with the dad, depressed on the couch, unable to move, and he's like stroking his head, and he's really looking after him, and he's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And then just gets up on top of the dad, and literally beats the shit out of him. It was such
a shocking scene.
But then once the dad gets up after beating him up, he's just like kissing his face.
There are moments in this film which just stand out
And then when he looks to his mum, and he's like, "That's what you need to do."
Yeah.
That's what you need to do.
So even in his own twisted head, there's sort of social norms and social things that he should and shouldn't do. He heads off to Hollywood at one point with a camera and films himself there. I thought that was intriguing. I mean, there was a lot in here. This was a really intense psychological portrait of a killer.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it reminded me at times. I don't know if you've ever heard of a film called Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. But that was made years ago when I was about your age. It came out, and it wasn't as kind of subtle as this at all. But in a weird way, this is the portrait of if not a serial killer, though I guess a mass shooter is a kind of serial killer, but certainly the portrait of a mass shooter. And what's clever about his performance is that whilst I wouldn't say you step in there and you feel massive reservoirs of empathy and sympathy for him, you feel for him, and I think that's important. You feel something for him,
Yeah.
and I think that
Whether
is the
that
strength
is
of his
hating him or
performance.
something, like you'll feel something towards him.
But I think you've summed it up perfectly. It's like those eyes. His eyes have stuck with me ever since. The emptiness but fullness of emptiness in his eyes is just quite shocking.
Yeah.
And without, again, I mean...
Oh, and there was that scene you said you liked as well, which was that moment with the doctor about his meds.
Oh my God, I love that
about
scene.
his antidepressants
Yes,
and stuff. It was just really like...
The long-haired psychiatrist type.
Yeah,
He was great. I
Yeah,
mean, you're right,
good.
every small
part.
performance. This is another one of those, like Baby Teeth, American and The True History of the Kelly Gang, directed by the same guy. Australian indie cinema is really something to get excited about. When this is a truly tight, thought-provoking, difficult, but incredibly sort of subtle and clever film that isn't at all intellectual. I don't know whether it's all about the spaces, whether it be the space in the soundtrack, the space in the story, the space of dialogue. There's a lot of space in this.
It didn't feel, but with that, didn't feel slow.
No.
I didn't feel like it was too long or it just felt like the perfect pace for a film like
all
that.
about the human condition. I'd have thought for you getting into, because you love going into, like with the Joker, you love going into the deep psychological recesses
It really
of
was
character.
the Joker film for just real life.
It was, if he was in real life. And then of course at the end, I mean everyone knows what happens in the end, and I thought the film was really clever in cutting off at the point that it cut off.
Yeah, I was hoping that it was going to be rich like that and stop there. I was like, oh, don't like...
Yeah. I think it was not only rich, it was even richer because it showed a sequence of him just prior to it kicking off. And I never thought you would be watching someone meticulously eating a fruit salad out of a plastic... It was so...
It was just a matter of factness of what he was going to do, and that he just knew that that's what he was going to do. Yeah. And...
that was it.
Like nothing was going to change it.
As significant as putting down his fruit salad, he was then going to pick up a gun.
Yeah. It was
so shocking.
It was almost like watching his suicide.
Very true. Very true.
Was that,
that emptiness.
Yeah, that just like, this is what is happening now.
Wow,
like,
that's a really interesting way.
Yeah,
you're right. He may as well have cocked the gun under his chin.
Yeah.
But it was the same emptiness that was there.
Yeah, like the whole bit where he sat at the table before he ends up shooting everyone. Everything he was doing, is exactly the same as if he just turned the gun on himself.
Yeah. God, really neat observation.
But he brought a lot of innocent people down with him. It's not okay.
Exactly. So how would you score this one, Matt?
Oh my God. Well, like I said, this was something I had didn't know what I was going into. I hadn't seen anything for it. I went in with high expectations because I knew that the actors in it were great.
Yeah.
And I loved the director because of the last Kelly Gang.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I just don't think I've felt like that in a movie in a very long time. Like I felt almost like how I did with the Joker. Like it was that level of intensity, and it really just like made you feel a lot of things, made you think about a lot of things, and it was it was a very intense film. I would personally recommend it to like everybody that I know. People that I know that would like it, like even with Mum, like that's how I do it with Hell as an
idea.
But the reason why she would love to see it is for the performances, like the acting in it. If you're into just seeing amazing performances, this film is one of those films. I can't fault a single character in it, like even tiny little actors. Yeah, if you get stressed easily in films, it's not the film for you.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it's a very stressful.
It's stressful. not that there's like, not like in a drama. Like it's not like there's loads of things happening at once, because you just don't know what. You always feel like something bad's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. So it's very stressful. Felt very on edge in the best way possible. And honestly, like I loved this film wholeheartedly. I genuinely don't think I could fault it. And usually one of the biggest things for me is soundtracks. Like I love a film with a good soundtrack. But I loved that this film just didn't have one. Yeah. Like it was really impactful, and it's in its own way. So I think I'd literally give this 100.
Yo, what a win! We haven't had 100 on the channel for a while, actually.
I can't fault this film personally.
Well, I'm going to just pick up on one of the things that, as we walked out, Maddie made this point about the soundtrack, and I've thought a lot about the soundtrack, or the lack of a soundtrack, and yet there is a soundtrack. There's a moment where, you'll understand when you see it, where Essie Davis's character plays music. She was an opera singer, and there was a moment where I thought it was being played in slow-mo, and you observed it's being played in rewind. And so there is...
Because of Nitram.
Yeah, Nitram. Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, of course, Nitram. Yeah. But for me, the lack of music did that thing that often I think music can be overused for in a bad way, which is steering you towards an emotional response.
Yeah, that's what Nan says a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of films do.
Feel something.
Yeah, she felt it about a trailer we watched the other day. The idea that you're being sort of having the emotions ladled towards you, and I thought that's what made.
This is the sad song. This is
exactly. Or even if and even if it's not sad or joyful, it's like. It's sinister.
Yeah, like
and I think this film, again, it's that, I want to say Australian confidence to strip things back almost to the bare bush of the
But it also shows how amazing the actors were. That they made us feel all those things without any music
whatsoever. Any music whatsoever. So, an incredibly atmospheric film without the need for soundtrack to create atmosphere is quite an achievement. Caleb Landry Jones, absolutely sensational, unvain, incredibly subtle, incredibly nuanced. He obviously found identification with this lunatic, this sociopath, this dangerous person, and that makes it a very complicated watch without it getting complicated in a way. And Judy Davis, Essie Davis, and the father were just absolutely sensational. When you're met with such complete commitment from a cast, you can't fail to be swept up and taken into this world. I would, like you, give it 100 out of 100. I think it's one of my favourite films of the year so far.
Same.
Really, really good.
Wow, I didn't think you were gonna. I thought it'd be like 90.
No. I keep thinking about it more and more and more, and it gets richer the more I think about it.
Yeah. I would need to see it again, but it would need to be a while.
Yeah. I kind of want to forcibly take people to see it, and then watch them a little bit like he does.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.